We're on YouTube. Antonio, let me know when you want to start. I'll take the graphic out.
Well, we can give, I'll start, but we can wait until maybe another minute. Or it's now,
Okay.
Let's see. I guess we can get started. Well, welcome to the June presentation of the budget for the community. Before we start, just introduce myself. My name is Anil Comello. I'm the interim deputy city manager for the city. And I wanted to start by thanking a few people who have been instrumental in creating this budget draft. Start with Rhonda, Rita, Vernesia, Bert from the finance department, along with Leah, who was kind enough to help us from the library. We've also received help from Catherine and Sharon in the human resources department, and most importantly, Delmi and Antonio from finance, as well as Tracy from RGS, without whom this presentation and the budget wouldn't have come together. So I'm going to jump right in.
Let me interrupt you for a second. We have translation services available. If anybody's interested, I'm going to say them in Spanish. Tenemos servicio de traducción para usuarios que quieren escuchar la presentación en español. Si desea escucharla de esa forma, por favor, oprime el botón que dice Interpretation. Parece como un globo en la parte de abajo. Cuando oprima eso, la presentación será en español. Okay. So, gracias. Thank you. Go ahead, Neil.
Oh, thank you, Antonio. Appreciate that. So let me start with the first slide. Whoops. So this presentation is the last of the 3 community presentations on the budget. We have been working on the budget presentation that will be going to council on June 8th. That budget will be the first city manager's budget that is fully balanced, which has taken into account input from the community, other stakeholders, as well as departments.
We do not see your PowerPoint slide if you have one up.
I'm sorry?
We did not see your PowerPoint if you have one up.
Oh. Thanks for letting me know.
We see it.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. So in today's presentation, we'll plan to cover some of the funding needs the city has and some possible solutions. We also will project the fund balance or the budget balance for operating budget balance for this year. And we'll provide initial draft budget for the next fiscal year. As I mentioned, our plan is to take a balanced budget to the city council next Tuesday, after which we will receive feedback from the city council and will present the operating budget as well as a CIP on June 15th, followed by final adoption by the city council on June 22nd. Before we go into this year's budget, just want to share some historical data and some challenges we've had. So one of the things that we have had to deal with is, because of our budget challenges, we've had to deal with and address funding deficits. And we have done that in a variety of ways. One is we have used one-time funds for ongoing expenses. Number 2, our pension and medical costs, that's post-employment costs, have kept rising over the last few years and will continue to rise in the next few years. We've also experienced negative fund balances. Our reserves have been below policy targets for many years. We hope to change that. And of course, we've had structural deficits, which means our ongoing regular revenues haven't covered our ongoing regular expenditures. And of course, in the last 2 years, we have, along with the rest of the nation, had to deal with the impacts of COVID-19. One of the impacts of not having a stable budget environment is that personnel salaries or compensation has been non-competitive to the local market. We have not invested in facilities and infrastructure, and our fleet and equipment replacement targets have not been met. Bottom line is we need a long-term fiscal stability or sustainability plan. I just want to give one example of how a lack of long-term planning and budgeting is impacting the city and its employees. As you can see, over the last 10 years, here's a breakdown of the raises that employees have received. You might say the firefighters union at 19% has received the largest among all the unions, but even that is only like 2% a year. That's barely keeping up with inflation. If you look at SEIU, full-time employees and local 21 mid-managers receive about 6% a year, which means all employees, in one shape or form or the other, are receiving less today, adjusted for inflation, than they received 10 years ago. Obviously, that leaves us with in the marketplace at a disadvantage to compete with other agencies and private sector for talent. It also means that we have lost probably and will continue to lose talented employees to other agencies. And that has an impact on productivity. It has impact on delivery of quality services to the community. So a long view is to invest in our employees, develop fiscally sustainable budgets and a long-range plan, minimize the probability that will have recurring budget crises, develop and fund the facilities master plan so that we don't have deterioration of our assets. And bottom line is we need to work with our labor partners to develop long-term solutions. So one way to do that is to increase revenues. I think this is one area which all of us can agree on. The other is to think about service modifications. Are there better ways, are there different ways of delivering services that are creative, that reduce costs, and yet provide high quality services to the community? An important consideration is the idea of reducing headcount. Now, mind you, as a department head, and I can tell you every single department could use more staff. We are already stretched thin. But the reality is that as long as we have the current headcount, the city will continue to be challenged with regard to the provision of raises and being competitive on compensation, as well as investing in other areas. Of course, layoff, having experienced that myself, shouldn't even be an option, frankly. So the other three probably should be areas where we need to collaborate and investigate and find creative solutions. So I just got to share that as we project out for 2021, the fiscal year ending June 30th, we're actually going to be projecting a positive balance. Well, how did we achieve that? For one thing, the city had to freeze 60 positions, saving about $10 million. In addition, like the rest of the country, every public agency created very, very conservative budgets. We were no different. Luckily for us, the economy came back. We have robust sales revenues. We had some extremely unusually large real estate transactions, which netted the city significant amount of revenues. But it also means that we continue to underfund facilities and infrastructure. We also had our employees experience no raises last year. And In addition, staff in all departments continued to tighten their belts. So these are the ways in which we had experienced a positive balance for the year. You want to take over, Antonio?
Sure. So this is the updated fiscal year 21 projected year imbalance. This is a projection based on numbers, revenues, and expenses through April 2021. So that means we're making projections for the rest of the year. That's 3 or 4 months of additional data that's still going to come in for sales tax, for example. We still have 4 months of data to receive. So these are projections. They could be higher, they could be lower. This is our best guess estimate as of a couple of weeks ago, where we think we might end up this year. That means revenue will be significantly higher than what we thought we were going to get at mid-year, and expenses lower, and a net surplus of 15.6. At mid-year, we thought that number was going to be closer to 4. We did think there was going to be a surplus, but it was much lower than what we're looking at right now. Again, this is an estimate, and things can change. We still have a few months to go, and more revenues to collect and expenditures to expend. Next slide, please. So what can we do if we have extra revenue? For one thing, we want to maintain the reserve level, and that means, and because the expenditures will be a little bit higher, well, to reach the reserve level, we need to allocate 4.2 from the current reserve level is 20.3. So we need to increase a little bit, and 4.2 of this excess could be used for that. Additionally, there's an issue with the housing authority, where we've been told we need to write off at least $6 million this year. That's not something we can postpone very much. That's something we need to seriously consider. Another item that needs to be reviewed is staff compensation. This would be a total of $2.3 million. Staff has also looked at setting aside $1.3 million for the reimagining public safety. So all together, that'd be about $15.5 million. That would be used from that excess. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our updated 21-22 initial draft. So this is actually what we took to City Council back on May 4th. The original projections had us at $182.9 million. That was about 7.4 million from the mid-year, or 4.2 increase. And the expenses at that time was 195.5, almost $22 million increase from mid-year. And that amounted to a budget gap of $12.6 million. That was what we presented at mid-year. Next slide, please. So what caused that gap? Sorry, this is the wrong slide. This should have been a couple of slides back. Okay, so the original reduction or shortfall was $12.6 million.
Let me go back.
No, this is fine. And this slide might also be a little bit out of order. This is how we reduced the gap. So from a shortfall of $12.6 million, we actually started reviewing all the revenue streams again, all the expenses again, for utility user. Actually, this is go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the updated 21-22 proposed budget. So again, we reviewed all revenues and all expenditures. For revenues, we saw several things happening. We received an updated sales tax forecast from our sales tax consultant, which netted an additional, if using their most likely scenario, an additional 1.3 million. We saw the utility user tax, the amount especially paid by Chevron. That's based on the CPI, is probably going to be a little bit higher than what we thought when we originally forecasted it in March and February, an additional $370,000. But the biggest item, or the biggest line item that we increased was documentary transfer tax. Currently, there's a tiered tax structure for the transfer tax that was approved by the voters a few years back, where the bigger properties actually pay a higher rate than the smaller properties. So if somebody buys a property for under $1 million, they pay 0.7%. If somebody buys a property for $50 million, they actually pay 3%. So that's a significant increase there. And from that, we've seen this significant increase going up every year. So based on the last 3 years of data, based on what we're seeing in the economy, based on the level of sales in Richmond, based on the large sales, what we in our original March forecasted, we thought that amount would be 8 million. But based on this more in detail analysis, we were increasing that one revenue stream from 8 million to 11 million. So that's the that increase of $3 million is included in the new projection for the revenues. And additionally, we're also including $4 million from ARPA into the 190. So total is an increase of about 15.3 on the revenue side. I'm sorry, 15.3 on the revenue side compared to mid-year, the mid-year 2021 budget. On the expense side, we're also seeing an increase here. A lot of it has to do with employee compensation. CalPERS funding, for example, that's gone significantly up. It's been going up every year. This year is no exception, and that was captured there. We're also unfreezing some positions that were frozen last year and some new personnel requisitions or personnel requests that have been put forward. Total increase there compared to the mid-year is 17 million. Altogether, this comes out to a net surplus in the proposed budget of only 36,000. Okay, here's a look at the historical general fund revenues. From this chart, you can easily tell that the top three revenue streams, which are property tax, sales tax, and utilities or tax, that close to 75% of the general fund revenue. What's grown significantly, or for me significant the last couple of years, is the other taxes. In other taxes, where you have the documentary transfer tax, the tax on the sale of property. And for the 21-22 budget, here's the breakdown again of the different revenues for, again, property taxes at 46 million, sales and use tax 50 million, utility user tax 45 million, make up the majority of the revenues that come into the city. Again, what's grown significantly is other taxes. Usually used to be closer to 11, 10 million. Now it's going to be 17 million. That also includes other items, but the main one is transfer tax. On the expenditure side, we've also seen a pattern of growth here. And of course, the majority of the expenditures, I think 80% is going to be payroll, salaries and wages, and payroll and fringe benefits. Those are by far and away where most of the expenditures in the city go. And here's a breakdown for the proposed year, how much is going into each expenditure category. For salaries and wages, over 73 million. Payroll and benefits, over 67 million. That's it, makes the majority of that. Okay, this budget that we're proposing, again, includes ARPA funding at $4 million. It includes our proposal to allocate some funds to reserves to get closer or to get to 15%. It includes equipment to replace old equipment that's badly needed at the tune of $3.6 million. Also includes $1.15 million for community facility improvements. Really need a lot more, but that's the amount we're putting in this year's budget for that. What's not included, there's a class and comp study currently going on that says to be completed probably in December of this year. I'm not sure what the results will be. Ideally, we put set aside a 6% compensation would come out to around $6.6 million, but did not have enough funds to do that. As mentioned earlier, we're going to write off $6 million for housing, though we probably will need to write off an additional amount, maybe up to $9 million. That's something that still needs to be researched, but that's something that's not included in this one. We'll have to look at it down the road in more detail. For the American Recovery Plan Act, ARPA, the city is supposed to receive the first tranche of funding or first bucket of money, first half of the money, 13.85 million. This is half of the 27.7 million. So we'll receive that shortly. proposing to use part of it, 1.63 million, for reimagining public safety. And we also want to use the numbers off. In fiscal year 21-22, we want to use $4 million to help cover the gap between revenues and expenditures. So key changes to revenues, again, that we updated from May 4th to now. Updated sales tax forecast by 1.3 million. Updated the UUT forecast by 370,000. That's based on CPI changes that have come out recently. On the other taxes, we reduced the hotel tax some more. This is probably the revenue stream that's been most impacted, or one of the revenue streams most impacted by COVID. And currently, the county is leasing 2 hotels in Richmond. That means the city is not receiving the hotel tax from those 2 hotels. One of them was the largest one in Richmond. And we're increasing the transfer tax, the documentary transfer tax, by $3 million. So we're going from an $8 million, which is pretty conservative, to $11 million. Again, this revenue stream is impacted significantly by a couple of transactions. One transaction can make a difference between up to $4 million, as the example of the sale of Hilltop. So that's a couple of transactions make or break a month or a year even. Again, for ARPA funding, we're including $4 million. So that's how we increase from the May 4th to the proposed budget. Those are all the main items that are changing on the revenue side. And at this point, any questions?
Okay, if you'd like to talk and ask a question, please raise your hand and we will open your microphone. Look for the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask a question.
Okay, this is Antonio. There was a question in the chat. Let me start off there. Katrina Ruck asked, your chart doesn't show ARPA 4 million in revenues. It's actually currently included in the transfers into the general fund. I'm not sure exactly how, we're still figuring out the accounting side of that, how to do that. But for now, it's included in there. Might be a good idea to break it out a little bit better in the next update that we do. Good point.
And I see a question from Amanda. The question asks about the class income study. And does it also include, let's see here. So the amount is not for the study itself, but is to hopefully to do the adjustment. But we have not actually put it in the budget. We are identifying that as a area of need. We believe the study will come somewhere that our data shows that Richmond is probably around 8 to 15% below market. We have no idea yet. Of course, we will be getting that result somewhere around September. But the $6 million was hoped to put together a package with the various bargaining groups in order to come close to meeting that gap.
All right, we have a speaker, GAIL. We're going to be opening your microphone and you can speak now.
Hi there. I'm a little confused or would like to know more about the $4 million from ARPA that's being included in this budget proposal. And I gather what you're saying is that it was the amount needed to come up with a balanced budget. So all this talk about surpluses, really we needed $4 million more in order to balance the budget. Is that correct, what you're saying?
Yeah, so there are 2 different years. The surplus or the excess revenues or expenditures is going to occur, we project is going to occur in this fiscal year, which means 2021. And we're also projecting a deficit of about $4 million in the next fiscal year, which is 21-22. And that's why we are considering, we are going to recommend to the City Council to utilize.
Well, that's certainly getting to the core of what's important about the question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Well, yeah, it's that, I mean, that is getting to the core of the question. The ARPA money, it seemed is best used for one-time programs. It's not sustainable. So you're proposing we use 4 million this year and probably another 4 million next year to fund city services that we can't afford.
Well, again, we are not, just to be clear, we are not requesting that, recommending that we use ARPA money for this year's budget, the 2021. We are recommending that be used in the next year's budget. And you are right, we generally wouldn't recommend using one-time monies, which ARPA money is, for ongoing expenses. But we're trying to get to a point where a staff report that will come out tonight will lay that out in more detail. We are hoping to begin to have longer term contracts with the bargaining groups, as well as long-term strategies to reduce costs and create more stable budgetary environments. But that will take time. And part of that, by the way, is the management partner study, which is currently underway. We hope to have some presentations with council to think about service modifications and the kinds of things that I touched upon today.
I don't want to, I want to just leave this by saying that you still have me at least confused about whether $4 million is going to be being proposed to be used in the 21-22 budget and also the 22-23 budget. I think it is.
So we are not talking, so I guess that's the confusion. We are not talking about 22-23 budget yet. We are only talking about what we are proposing now is the fiscal year 21-22 budget. And yes, in that year, we are proposing or we're recommending that the city council utilize $4 million out of the $27 million ARPA funding to bridge the gap.
And so it would be very helpful if you talk to us more about what the gap includes. What are we using one-time funds to spend on? It's hard to react to this conversation without knowing that. Except for, you said that there is some money being proposed of this towards reserves, 2.8 million, and we might want to reconsider that, it would seem, if what we need to do is spend one-time money for it. But I'll let other people talk. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Gail. Katrina has her hand up again. I'm going to open up your microphone, Katrina. You can ask your question.
Thank you. Thanks, Anil and Antonio, for the presentation. Just a quick question. I didn't see anything about the business license tax revenue.
Okay, that's included in the, I'm sorry, I started answering your question in the chat and
it's
the
okay.
question went away. Sorry about that. It's included in the licenses, permits, and fees category. So when in that revenue, that one revenue category goes up from 5.7 this year to 11.8 next year. Good percentage of that is basically from Measure U.
Antonio, can you still hear me, or am I still muted? Or am I muted?
Could you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
No, is there a way to break that out just so we can see that? Because you broke out the sales tax and the utility users tax.
I mean, we can think about it. There's going to be even more lines of details as it is. Usually try to consolidate, but that's something we'll have to discuss if we can break it out. Also break out ARPA, for example.
And isn't ARPA, I mean, just the last caller had a good question, but ARPA funds can only be used for certain expenditures, correct? So it's not like you can just throw the money in as a gap measure. It has to be associated with specific expenditures.
You're right, but the out of the, so let's see, about $15 million losses that the city had in revenues, they are eligible to recoup. The city is eligible to recoup so about $13 million of that, of the revenue losses. So, so it qualifies for the ARPA under the revenue loss category. And then, of course, you can rededicate that or utilize that for other purposes. And so in this case, we were trying to meet the gap. And by the way, the previous caller, I think her name was GAIL, made several good points. And we acknowledge that we don't usually like to use one-time monies for ongoing expenses. And she's right that we may want to reconsider its use to meet the 15% revenue, rather reserve target, which the city hasn't met in many years, and we were hoping to meet that in this upcoming year. But those are all considerations that we'll be discussing with council next week.
Thank you, Anil and Antonio.
Thank you, Katrina. If anybody has one last question, please use the raise hand feature here on Zoom. And Amanda would like to say something. Amanda, you can ask your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you guys read more detail about what the write-off is for the housing authority.
Anthony, you want to take that or you want me to try?
You can take a shot at it.
Yeah, so Amanda, the housing authority has, I just use broad terms, a liability to the city on their books for about $15 million. Now, how it was booked, there are a couple of different categories. Without going into a whole lot of detail, the bottom line was that the city expected the housing authority to get reimbursed from the housing authority for about $15 million. We have since found, or recently found, that a large portion of it, in fact, all $15 million may be uncollectible. We have ascertained that at least $6 million of this has to be written off immediately. And the reason is because there's not even a question whether we'll get paid or not. That is definitely a loss. And we have checked with our auditors, and the auditors have confirmed that we need to write it off this year. So that's why we are writing that off, that portion off. Now we still are left with $9 million that we think we need to do some further research. It is possible, although very unlikely, that some portion of that may be eligible for reimbursement. And so we have hired our accountant to look through that and determine what portion of it, if any, we'll be able to make demand on. So that's where we are. That's where since we are sure about the $6 million, we chose to write it off this year. And as it becomes clearer as to what portion of that other $9 million can be recovered, we will make the accounting adjustments accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
And that was our last speaker.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time. Please tune in next week at the City Council meeting.